Microphone, please.
Microphone.
Microphone is the first item on the agenda. Okay. Now I have may I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Do I have it? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Item number 3 is public comment for items not on the agenda. I do know we have at least one individual. Come on up and introduce yourself, sir.
Thank you. My name is Jason DeBueno, and I'm with SilverKey. And I shared some information earlier with PPACG, but I also want to make sure that you were all aware of this as well. What it is that in the Region 7 of the behavioral health care for Medicaid, which is Park, El Paso, and Teller, there's a change that's happening as of January 1, where there's a rate reduction of 20% of fees for individual providers that deliver behavioral health services to individuals with mental health and substance misuse needs in the mom and pop provider network out there. It may not be intuitive why I would bring this forward to this group, but a couple things I want to just bring to your attention. The first one is SilverKey's board generally does not take a stance on anything that would necessarily be of a conflictual type of situation. However, it's very clear that if Medicaid makes these kind of reductions in their pay for the provider network, we risk people, both seniors and individuals with disabilities who already have challenges with access to care, to be further challenged with being able to access the behavioral health services that are part of their benefit. What that means for us as providers, and as many of you know, SilverKey is a specialty provider for transportation. What that means is many individuals that have anxieties about being on a bus maybe with other people or a van with other people, or struggle with being able to manage their illness to be able to access the health care appointments that they have, this has an impact to your systems that you're working to support as well. So my request to you is to take a look at the socials for SilverKey. In our social media, we've got this information outlined, and we have been working alongside another organization, the National Alliance for Mental Illness Colorado, to be able to float out a petition for people to get informed about this issue. And if you have an interest in being able to be part of the voice that this does not make sense for this region, Park, El Paso, and Teller, to sign the petition, and it's a very brief document. But I do think that if we don't make the voice heard of those that are most at risk, this will impact systems with people that are undertreated or not treated, and you are part of the solution for those individuals. So I would invite you to become aware of that and decide whether you could help support the cause. Again, you can go to silverkey.org, or you can go to our social media linkages for that information.
Do you know when the deadline for public comment on this rule changes?
So the way that the question was about public comment, what it is right now is that the way the system is set up is Healthcare Policy and Finance is the entity that manages the Medicaid dollars, and it's been contracted to a private organization to make this decision, so they don't have to have public comment, which is why we're moving to a different path of petitioning for that organization to think differently about this decision.
All right, thank you. Wayne, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, what is this similar to what's happening in other regions in the state?
Good question. This is actually affecting Region 6 and 7, and Region 6 is in the Denver area. All the other RAEs, the regional accountable entity, are not being affected by this. This is affected just in Region 6 and 7. And it's the look that you have is the same look that we've got. Why here, why now, when we've already got such underfunded and under-resourced workforce for the behavioral health needs of individuals? It is a challenge.
And is this just so I know to whom to direct things, is this a state decision? You said Healthcare Policy and Finance?
Healthcare Policy, yeah. So Healthcare Policy and Finance is the entity that manages the state dollars for the service, or the federal dollars. And then what they did is they contracted with an entity called the RAE to be able to move the services forward. So I think that right now the biggest influencer potentially is Healthcare Policy and Finance to step in and really try to understand why the RAE made this decision and what the impact would be if it continues. But the problem is that it's a little bit like catching smoke. It's hard to know which part of Healthcare Policy and Finance will step in when the RAE is the one that had the full latitude apparently to make this decision.
Okay, so it's a decision by the current administration and their designees.
And the designees right now, it's Colorado Community Health Alliance is the local entity that manages Region 7, which is Parka, Paso, and Teller for the care coordination on primary care and the behavioral health care through the Medicaid cap.
Okay, thank you.
And the linkage, again, is on our social media. It's got the details of that. Thank you for giving me a couple minutes.
Ms. Avila.
We'll have a session. So, thank you, David. You know, Jason, I'm so grateful for you to bring this to our attention, and I'm counting on people here knowing what to do to support this, because when you think about it, this will have a domino effect. And right now, we have a crisis with homelessness. And I'm thinking people with experiencing, mental health issues, we can have a new set of people on the streets if this isn't fixed. So, I mean, we can't look at it as just in a silo, and it's like, it's just a certain part of the population with mental health issues or disability issues and transportation. It will have that domino effect, and we will increase our chronically homeless. So it's something that we all need to get on board and figure it out, because they've already been cut once, right?
Yeah, there have been challenges for sure all the way through. And I'll just kind of dovetail. Thank you so much for your comments. I'll dovetail just real quickly on that, and this is something to consider. When we think about the homeless population or others that have disabilities, it really is only about the 1% of those individuals that are covered by Medicaid that are the highest utilizers of the system of care. And if they go untreated, you could just magnify and amplify that amount of expense to our community. And so that's why we've got to get ahead of this. We often talk about prevention works. Well, this one is preventing what is going to be a challenge if people do not get the treatment that they need. So thank you for adding those comments.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, sir. Do I have any other public comments? Thank you. Item number 4 is approval of minutes from the October 9, 2019 regular meeting. Any corrections to the minutes? May I have a motion? Second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Item number 5A, Certificate of Appreciation for Ann Esch. She is not here. I will read the Certificate of Appreciation and give it to Rick. I guess Ann wanted to get out as quickly as she could. So, the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority wishes to acknowledge its deepest gratitude to Ann Esch for her invaluable contribution to the PPRTA Citizens Advisory Committee from June of 2018 to October of 2019. Even though she's not here, she is a member of the group that a couple of months ago we honored in total because of their amazing attendance. So her attendance was as amazing as everybody else. I thank Ms. Esch, and I continue to thank all members of the Citizens Advisory Committee for their dedication. And I will return this to Mr. Sonnenberg. It is signed, by the way, by both myself and Mr. Godfrey. I should indicate that. Item number 5B, speaking of the CAC, Mr. Godfrey, the monthly report from the CAC chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. Jim Godfrey, Chair of the CAC. Just a quick comment about Ann. Ann hadn't been with us very long, but I would just like to say that she was a great contributor and a great representative of Green Mountain Falls, and so we appreciate the work that she added to our group. So our meeting last week, first of all, we had a real good discussion on the budget presentation that you'll get today. Everyone that had questions asked, and they were answered satisfactorily. I must have had 10 or 15 little blue sticky things all over my file, and Mike and the staff and guys did a really good job of answering everything, and so the CAC recommends approval of the of the budget as presented. On the city contracts, I had a good discussion of those. There were 6 items. 5 of those were voted on. One of them was an informational only discussion that Mike and the city will present to you. We had no questions and recommend approval of those contracts as well. City of Manitou Springs came forward with a request for a contract for purchase of a partial, using PPRTA money to partially buy a new Bobcat. That was a good discussion, and we recommend approval of their request for that Bobcat. Manitou Springs also presented a request to rehab their maintenance facility. Let me tell you, this discussion probably lasted 40 to 45 minutes, and we covered a range of things from voter intent to, and the building is not just road, it's shared by, I think, Public Works and Utilities. Someone will correct, is that correct? So we don't know the total cost. That was the one thing that I left my notes at home, and I don't recall that there was a total cost of the rehab, but they were requesting $350,000. And so there was discussion, everything, covering everything from personal health and welfare to ran the gamut. Everybody had comments, and in the end, the CAC voted 9-6 against approval for that, with one abstention. And so you'll hear those presentations today. And I can just say that we covered a broad breadth of issues and topics and concerns. Like I said, so it was a good spirited discussion, and the vote is what it was. And I think that there were a lot of really good points made. It looks like it's allowed in the state statute for RTA funds to be used for that purpose. And in the budget presentation, transportation was using some RTA money as a federal match or grant match for some federal money to build a new bus barn for transit. So that was discussed, as well as if we're doing it for one, why not the other? So there were pros and cons and good spirited discussion. So, like I said, it was a good 45-minute discussion or so.
And along those lines, if I might, was there a consensus for the 6 and a consensus for the 9? Or was it mixed between?
No, I think it was a consensus in general. There were a lot of really good points made, and the 4 was, why not? This supports operations. It is essential to their road maintenance and that kind of stuff. As we understand it, there was 28 or so people that work in that building, and they're now in trailers because the building is not satisfactory. There's one bathroom, so it gets into a health issue. And there's some respiratory issues and some of those things that were presented. And so I think that on the 4 side was, why not? This is all part of essential thing. On the negative side, it was things like, if it was so essential for Manitou, why didn't they put it on the ballot? And then voter intent. Did the voters in the local thing, not the state statute, but in our local ballot, did they really intend that money to be built for buildings? And of course, the counter to that is, well, Transit's doing it, we just approved that. So there was, like I said, it kind of ran the gamut of discussion. So
Thank you.
And then the other thing, well, that was really the essential of the CAC meeting, of anything in terms of recommendations.
Does anybody have any further questions or comments for Mr. Godfrey? May I have a motion, please? We need a motion to approve the CAC report. Thank you. A second?
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Godfrey. Item number 6 is financial reports. I will call her, it is good news, but it's beyond good news. We'll just call it
Great news.
great news, Bev.
Okay.
Or it's It's nice to see you, Bev.
Okay, thanks. All right, for the month of September, for sales and use tax purchases into September, we received $9,586,000. So we were almost $750,000 ahead of the monthly budget for September, and year-to-date, we're $7,787,000 ahead of the year-to-date budget. And then on page 2, compared to last year's September, the actual, we were $343,000 ahead, or almost 4%, and we're $4.4 million ahead year-to-date. As far as for the CDOT payment, last year's payment was $3,614,000. So we need additional revenue, or revenue ahead of budget, of $11,611,000. And in order to take the 55% to get $6,386,000. So right now we've got almost 7.8 for the year-to-date, and then we have another $2 million of interest that is in excess of budget, so we could hit the ahead of budget this year to pay CDOT off. So just keep our fingers crossed for the last 3 months of the year.
Terrific, thank you. Anybody have any questions? This is not an approval, is it?
Right, just
Thank you,
information.
information only. Okay, item 9A, budget item 7, budget presentation.
All right, so I'll do an overview of the budget. The CAC approved this unanimously with no changes. And then what we've been doing is have the member governments available for questions. So if you turn to page 4, we determined in a prior board meeting that we would use $102 million for the sales and use tax, and then I estimated $2 million of interest revenue, and the sales and use tax collection fee to the state of $270 comes off of those numbers, and administrative costs estimate of $766. We subtract that and then subtract our reserve adjustments. So we have the net revenue of $102,684,000, with 10%, $10 million going to transit, 35%, almost $36 million going to maintenance, and 55% going to capital, about $56 million and a half. So then the maintenance allocation is by the decennial census to the member governments, and then the capital allocation is pretty much the same. It's just a rounded figure, and that was based on the original estimates the member governments came up with for their projects in 2012, before it went out to ballot. So transit's allocation of $2,268,000 plus their estimated transit fare box revenue of almost $3.7 million. Transit's budget, new allocation or new funds for this year is almost $14 million. So I don't know if you have any questions about that, but that's really a general overview. The administrative expenses have to be under the 1%, and right now they come in at 0.71%.
Terrific.
So, any questions for me?
Any questions in general for Bev regarding the budgets? And what I'm going to plan on doing is just going down the list. Is there any questions for the town of Rama's budget? Seeing none, we'll go to item 7C. Any questions for Green Mountain Falls? Seeing none, item 7D. Any questions for the budget for Manitou Springs? Seeing none, 7E. Any questions for El Paso County? And I do have a couple of questions, Jennifer, if you want to come on up. And they're just general. I think they're probably going to be addressed by what we're going to do in January. So I'm giving you a heads up. Just the question being, and if we need to defer this to January, because I know that you're planning on presenting the A-list schedule in January, I'm okay deferring and waiting till then, but just generally, where are we at on the status, and do you have is there any kind of plan outside of, should have looked at my question before I asked you. Where are we at in terms of scheduling the completion of the A-list items and things like that through El Paso County?
So we, as you know, the board asked us to kind of do some new reports in June, and then also we did that in, I think, September or October. After that, we had some discussions with PPRTA staff, and one of the things that the county is going to add to our, those new quarterly reports that the board asked us to do is going ahead and putting together a schedule showing those completion dates or when we expect those milestones. So that's something that we are going to add to our next report, which I think is due to Rick in December, and then you'll see it at the board date in January. What I would say in regards to our overall project status is that if you look at my July report and then our September report, June or September, those dates, when we reported in September or October, we were actually ahead of some of those dates that I had anticipated earlier towards the middle of the year. We have 4 projects that we have either under ad or planning to get advertised this year. So in looking at all of our projects, the ones that are county-led, I anticipate every project will either be finished construction, in the design phase, or under construction by early next year.
Terrific.
So we will add those end dates and put that trajectory out so that the board has an understanding of where we are in total.
And in the budget, then, what I was going to ask, it assumes the document, the report that we're expecting to see in January.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I think again, what I'd say is that a couple of the projects that we have with large dollar amounts are going to be innovative contracting, and we're happy to say on the project that South Academy, which is part of the Build Grant application, we did receive word actually
that's
during
right.
the CAC last week that this region received that funding source. So we're really excited, and that's a great example. That's about $23 million of our overall budget, and we've been working with CDOT, and we anticipate to be able to announce the contractor, which is the CMGC, which is helping us to accelerate that project. So I think you'll be happy to see the schedules that we're going to be able to show you in January.
Terrific. And Andy wanted us to particularly commend you for the Bill Grant. So well done. I understand you've been very active in getting that. Well done. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, congratulations on that. And I did, so just to follow up on Mr. Geisinger's question there. So you're anticipating that what you present to us will show the county finishing its projects on the A list a couple years ahead of time, about the same time as the city, or is that accurate?
We're putting together those schedules, so I want to be able to report that to you, but I think that we're showing that we're in advance of what I anticipated in mid-year, and we are really trying to move those projects ahead. I think what is difficult to say is that, the engineering usually takes a certain amount of time, where, a critical path on many of these projects is the property acquisition. And if you look at a couple of our large projects, South Academy and Mesa Ridge Parkway, for the most of those, we actually have the right-of-way for those projects. So there's a couple others where it's going to be difficult. There's going to be a lot of right-of-way acquisition on Highway 105. So we need to project that out, but we'll give you our best estimate. And what I will tell you is that we are moving as quickly as possible to finish these projects out in advance, anticipating, a ballot issue in 2022. So we're not sitting on our hands.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Waller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also wanted to give a huge shout out to Jennifer. What most folks don't know is CDOT, this was a CDOT grant, but Jennifer really wrote it. And I think one of the things that she understands and knows is how to catch the attention of folks in this administration in order to receive these federal dollars for us. I think just since I've been in the county now, we've gotten about $100 million in federal grants coming to our region to get transportation projects done, which was, I think unheard of 10 years ago. So huge congratulations and thank you to Jennifer and her team.
Any other questions, comments regarding the El Paso County budget? Thank you, Jennifer. And
Shirley.
again, congratulations. Item 7F, City of Colorado Springs budget. Does anybody have any questions or concerns for Mr. Chavez? So then we go to item 7G, public comments. Does anybody have any public comments on the budgets? Seeing none, may I have a motion on item 7?
Move approval of the budgets.
Oh,
Along with-
I am premature.
Today is just the discussion
Okay.
item. In
Sorry.
December, we'll have the public meeting where you approve the budget and appropriate the funds.
Well, we
I'm-
can talk to Rick about the approval that's right next to there.
Oh, my memo says discussion.
Well,
No, that's
All right.
Okay.
So it is on the record then, Mr.
Okay.
Sonnenberg.
Do we need a motion to
Do we-
set the formal hearing date for the
I
budget?
think we did that last.
Are we okay there?
Right, that was
Okay.
last month.
Okay. Thank
In
you.
order, and it's already been noticed in the paper, so we're
Okay.
set.
Good.
Thank you all. Item 8, 2019 capital maintenance and public transportation contracts. 8A, City of Colorado Springs. Mr. Chavez.
Good afternoon, Board. Mike Chavez, City Engineering. I've got 5 items that we'll need a vote on, and then the last one's informational. So the first item we have is a maintenance contract for CNL Water Solutions for the cured-in-place pipe lining under sections of road of Union, Johnstown, and Palmer Park. This is for operations and maintenance, and that's a $50,000 contract. Next item is not a renewal, but exercising the first option on NV5's program management contract for the city. They help with us with the RTA program. Last year, it was the first year we recompeted it. They did win it, and the first year was about a $2.3 million contract. This year, this last year, we ended up not using one of the program managers. We only used 2 instead of 3. And then there's a little bit of carryover. So this year, we're looking for a $1.73 million contract. Next item is, give me a second here to. So last year I came to the board to talk about working with MVS. They are developing land that's adjacent and part of the Centennial Extension that has a landfill. So we have Fillmore here, I-25 and Fontanero. So the extension project will build this road. Now there's a little piece here that we finished last year, so from Van Buren to Fillmore, Centennial is complete. We're working on this final stretch. So last year, MVS came to us, and this purple area is the landfill, and there's a couple of fingers that extend under our right-of-way that they have. They are obligated to clean up, and they approached us and said, you know, they wanted some financial assistance, and we looked at it, and we came into the board and explained that we thought if we cleaned up those little fingers, we thought it could cost us $2 to $3 million. They wanted some assistance in the form of $1.4 million, and we thought that was a good deal because basically they're going to not only clean up the right-of-way, but also grade it down to the subgrade. So that's work that would need to be done anyway. we liked that because it puts the liability on them, and we didn't know what might come up. Well, what's come up is there's more trash, there's deeper, it's deeper and bigger area than they thought. So what MVS has come to us now is they need more dirt, and it's dirt that so what they propose is that they would grade out an extra 1,600 feet of Centennial and then be able to use that dirt on their site. And we, again, think it's a good deal because it gets more work done on the road. It helps ensure that they continue with their cleanup efforts and that they are successful. And the price that they gave us when we, look at how much dirt they're moving, and there's some drainage work that they will do that needs to be done anyway. Basically, it's a reasonable price. I think it's a price that we'd pay, maybe even more, because if we bid it in a year or two. So, this is their area that the first agreement that we agreed to. That's the 1.4. The work that they're doing is this extra 1,600 feet, and they requested, or we worked out a price of about $1.2 million. Again, this is a more detailed picture. You can see that there's two areas where the landfill is under our right-of-way, and that's getting cleaned up. This just shows, just the cut limits. So we have some easements that we acquired from them. And this just is kind of a detailed grading plan that shows that they'll go from the end of their property all the way just short of 7th Street. There's a detention pond here that needs to be built in the project anyway. They'll grade that out for us, and the road through here. So, and just this kind of shows that these cuts are like 20 and 30 feet. So there's a lot of dirt that's getting moved on this project. Anyway, so I guess bottom line is we think it's still a good deal to help them. It's work that we're going to have to pay for anyway, and it'll just get it done ahead of time. And again, it keeps the liability and the onus on him to get everything cleaned up.
And just to clarify, because I do remember this was presented before, these are separate agreements from the original agreement. They are still honoring the original agreement.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, and we pay him based on work progress. So, he's got to do a certain amount of work. And on that first agreement, we've paid out about $800,000. So this is something that, he needs to do the work and then get paid. Now, this is subject to agreement being approved by all the attorneys, RTA, city. And so once that agreement is agreed to, then this is contingent on that. And the agreement does have provisions that if for some reason he doesn't do the work and we go in there and do it instead, there's a way of recouping our costs. Okay, all right. Next item is a change order for Max Green Consultants. They were commissioned to do a traffic study of the Ivyville neighborhood, which is kind of adjacent to the South Nevada redevelopment area, and the neighborhood was just concerned about what's going to happen with all this commercial growth. One of the things that came out through the public meetings is there was some concern about the operation of the I-25 and Nevada-Tejon interchanges. So this change order is to have them look at those operations, come up with some analysis and some recommendations on maybe some improvements that would be funded in the future. Last item is just a renewal of all our on-call contracts. There's, I don't know how many, 100. Just basically they would be renewed based on the terms that they were originally approved on. They're usually $200,000 max limit change order or task orders.
Any questions on any of the contracts from the city of Colorado Springs? Mr. Williams.
I'm ready with a motion.
Oh, then I was going to ask for a motion. Go ahead.
Move approval.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And then I understand you have an informational.
Yes. So we started working on the Black Forest widening from Woodman up to Research Boulevard. And so we're about a year. We still have about a year, maybe a year and a half of design before we go to construction. But couple of things have come to our attention. The first is the intersection of Cowpoke and Black Forest has had a lot of housing development around it, and there's a new school that's opening or opened up, and we made it a four-way stop, and it's very congested and very dangerous. We are hearing reports that people on Black Forest pretty much are running the stop sign and not really stopping, and the Cowpoke's backed up really bad during the school time. So we've gotten a lot of concerns and calls from citizens about doing something even before this project started. So what we are looking at doing is actually putting a temporary signal up there. We got a price. It's going to be about $50,000, but we think from a safety standpoint, it's worth putting up there just to get some safety and some more help reduce the congestion. So we just want to bring that to your attention. The other item is that there are water quality requirements, detention and water quality that the city has on the projects, and since we're disturbing more than an acre, that's triggered that. Again, since this area is growing and developing so fast, there's very little land around there. So there's a parcel of land on the southeast corner of Vollmer and Black Forest that is vacant, but the owners are looking at developing it. So before they do that and kind of take up the last area that we would be able to do some water quality upon, we've approached them and expressed an interest, but wanted to just let the board know that that is a commercially zoned area. So the purchase of that property, we're estimating could be anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million. But I did want to bring that because we have done water quality in other RTA projects, but this is, I don't think we've come with a land purchase of that size for that. So I just wanted to just give you a heads up on that.
Do you have a time frame for these items?
I would imagine, the signal we're trying to put in the first of the year. Okay. We're just working on a few things, the details out, and might have to have Mountain View move some lines. So we're trying to get that up, as soon as we can. And then the land purchase, I would imagine probably sometime, we still have to get an appraisal and negotiate and all that. But I would think, within the first half of 2020, we'd probably come back. We just want to get this taken care of so it doesn't go away, because then it creates real problems if we don't have somewhere to build these facilities.
Any questions for Mr. Chavez? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Item 8B, City of Manitou Springs. Welcome, Mr. Jeff Jones. I understand you are the new Public Works Director of Manitou Springs.
That is correct, sir.
Well, welcome.
Well, thank you.
8B is the Bobcat, and we'll get to the controversial one at 8C.
We call it the fun one, not the
fun one.
The fun one. So we do have two efforts I'd like to speak about this morning. The first one being the use of transportation maintenance funds for the purchase of a maintenance and transportation support equipment, and that being the Bobcat 560. This equipment will be used primarily for street work, as well as putting up street signs, street sweeping, asphalt replacement. And with our narrow roads that we have there in Manitou Springs, it would be a huge asset to us to making sure that we're keeping our streets safe for not only our residents, but for the folks that visit there. The cost of this particular piece of equipment is $65,000. We're only asking for $24,000 from the PPRTA because other departments might use it. So we have $41,000 from other sources that we'll be using for their portion of using the equipment. We'll use it also for snow removal. It has two attachments to it, one being the snow removal blade that could be used on some of the sidewalks, and then we have a large snow removal disc on it that's used for parking lots. and that's what we'll be using that for.
Any
Questions?
questions regarding item 8B? This is an approval item. Can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There are none. You are
right.
1 for 1, Mr. Jones.
I'll take that. All right.
We'll keep you perfect for now.
All right,
For
that's
the
right.
8C.
We'll see what happens. I do appreciate Mr. Godfrey on his overview of, we did have a very good discussion on the use of transportation and maintenance funds for transportation and maintenance building. I think it's very fair, and they did a good job, and I appreciated their professionalism. Okay, so let's just get into it real quick. What we're requesting is $350,000 of transportation and maintenance funds from our funds to use with your approval for a building that is insufficient, antiquated, it has one bathroom facility in it for almost 30 people, 30 maintenance workers. It's had air quality issues. We've had tests done. There hasn't been any significant scare on the mold, but we have had so many people that has had respiratory issues while they were in there. Everybody moved out to a trailer. We have all these people in one trailer that has no bathroom, no facilities whatsoever. Does have heat, which is good, but our facility up there is just needs to be replaced. Now, question would be asked, what does that have to do with maintenance and funds? Well, if you don't have a good facility to work out to begin with, you're not going to have a good maintenance program. And it's limiting what we can do and how quick we can get it done. And I think it truly affects the longevity of the maintenance that we perform there in Manitou Springs. You have to have a good facility. Just as we're sitting here right now, if we didn't have a good facility to have these board meetings, then that would count against us and why we can get things decided. So also there's a question of, has this ever been brought up before of anybody requesting PPRT money? And it has. So about 14 years ago, the city of Colorado Springs asked for $4 million to build a north side or north end maintenance facility, or to improve it. And then they were going to pay it back, I believe, over a 3 or 4 year period. So you ask, well, why do I bring that up, and how does it parallel what we're doing now, and how is it different? And I'll tell you how our request is different from that. For one thing, it was 14 years ago. Needs have changed. Second thing is, it was $4 million that was being asked for. We're asking for $350,000. And the last thing is, and I think this is probably the most important thing, is that the city of Colorado Springs, nothing against them, I live in Colorado Springs myself, but they have a lot of maintenance facilities. We have one. And that one is not getting the job done, period. Percentage-wise of people who would be using this facility, I'd say it'd be 65% of our streets, 65 to 70% of our streets folks. Then we have a separate facility that water and waste use, and then the rest of it would be used for our parks and our facility folks. So the majority of it would be for our streets and transportation folks, as well as administrative and other uses. So the total cost, and one thing I didn't present, I appreciate Mr. Godfrey bringing this up to me. The total cost in order to do this the way we would like to do it will be about $525,000 to $550,000. And that's where we got other funds that we're going to be using to add on to this $350,000 we're requesting in order to get to that point of where we want to be in order to do it. Yes, sir.
Oh, Mr. Williams. Yes,
So a couple questions
Yes,
for
sir.
you. You said that 14 years ago, the city borrowed money from the RTA and then paid it back. Is that what you said?
They requested it. It was denied.
It was denied.
It was denied. So I was just giving you a precedence of what
Okay.
was done before.
Because I was pretty certain we had denied that, and so I wasn't clear.
If I said
from
that, I
what you said.
misspoke. I meant it was requested.
Okay, requested but denied.
Correct, sir.
So, City of Manitou Springs has a maintenance of effort requirement under the Pikes Peak RTA. What is that dollar number
As far as what we're getting funded to us this year,
in terms of what your maintenance of effort is under the RTA promise?
Well, we're getting, as far as funding, we're getting $305,000 this year, and we have a carryover, I believe, of 400. Let's look right here. Altogether, it's over $700,000, so it's 400 and an estimated.
So I think you're misunderstanding my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What?
Oh, Mr. Sonnenberg's going to go get that information that he's asking
Okay.
for.
So the reason the RTA board rejected in the past is because, first, that was never part of the campaign or the promise.
Okay.
You may be aware that CDOT came under intense review for buying a new building for CDOT headquarters. They got lots of adverse publicity. That's, I think, a couple years ago when that occurred. And so the campaign was always about the road maintenance. And the theory in passing it is that cities, counties then have responsibility to provide those facilities, whether it's the city maintenance facilities, whether it's the Chuck Brown facility the county has. We've never funded those out of the RTA. It's always been, these are dollars going onto the roads.
Right.
And I certainly don't argue the need for a maintenance facility. So a lot of your presentation was about why this is a need. I agree with that. I just don't think historically this has ever been the place that we've said we fund facilities. And that would be a significant change from what we told the voters. And that's a significant concern for me. The reason I asked the question of how much is the maintenance of effort dollars, and I don't know, Ken, if you know off the top of your head. Okay. Rick's getting it. But you've got a certain amount of maintenance of effort dollars that Manitou must spend. And so I'm suggesting there might be a way to accomplish what you need is if you use those maintenance of effort dollars for the transportation facility and come to this body for the road paving or the equipment that you need. And that still may get you there. But I have a problem with funding directly buildings, and I've been pretty consistent in this over the time I've been on the board. So that's what I'm saying. What else? What are you using your maintenance of effort dollars for?
Maybe I don't understand what you're saying with maintenance of effort dollars. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Okay.
Because I'll tell you this, I've been in this position about 4 months.
Okay.
And
I
about 2 months
apologize.
ago.
I'm presuming certain things. Let me go back then and give a little bit of background. When the Pikes Peak RTA is passed, one of the promises in it is that the cities and the county will continue to spend a certain amount of dollars on transportation.
Sure.
And so we promised a maintenance of effort. In other words, this wasn't going to be bait and switch where we took the new funds the voters gave us and then reduced the existing transportation funding stream. So every member government has a maintenance of effort saying this is how much we promise to spend every year. And on the maintenance side, every member government has met that each year.
Okay.
The city had a time period when we did not meet the transportation numbers. And Rick has that number.
Has the number now, yes.
So that,
349,680, just a hair under 350, 349,680.
so if Manitou's provision is spend $350,000 a year in maintenance of effort,
Okay.
are there eligible expenditures under what we've typically funded for RTA that you could then shift to RTA and use that 350 or some other portion to fund this needed building?
Very good question, and I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, off the top of my head. I would have to sit down with finance, and I would have to discuss that with them, because I don't know the exact answer to that. But I do understand what you're talking about now.
And just to interject for a second, Mr. Godfrey is jumping out of his seat to
I
comment.
just wanted to clarify, they're not requesting additional money, this is coming out of their
Right.
current allocation.
Right.
So I was just going to
Okay.
make that clear.
Yeah, I understand that part. The question is whether out of the allocation, this is the proper amount. And I'm suggesting there's two $350,000 numbers here. One of those is the maintenance of effort,
Right.
which is all city funds that the RTA has no control over, and the other is the 350 you're asking for this building.
Sure.
And I'm asking, and I'm fine with delaying this for a month if that would give you the time then to review and say, does this make sense to kind of switch these two so that we come forward with an eligible project?
Okay.
Any other questions, Mr. Duray?
Yeah, I just wonder, and Mr. Jones, I appreciate your needing to take a look at it, but just from what I know, the current maintenance of effort dollars are programmed. In other words, those are things that are in the works now, they're ongoing. To switch all of that, I think, would be pretty difficult, and to break out things and say, okay, this portion could come over here and so forth. I think that'd be a challenge. I understand what you're saying, but again, those are things that are ongoing projects, money's being spent, every day and so forth. So to make that shift at this point probably would be challenging. Creative, but challenging. Well, I appreciate that, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but wanted to fill you in on just a little bit more detail, and I appreciate Councilman Williams' comment about the need versus the intent. And I think if you look at the RTA statute, it is clear that at least the maintenance facility is part of the statute. It's part of the intent. I think that if you're looking at what does it take to have a maintenance effort, it's clear it takes people, it takes equipment, it takes a facility, and it takes money. You can't do you can't do a maintenance without all of those things. And so for us, unfortunately, we are such a small community, it's difficult to shift things around. Mr. Godfrey said, well, why don't we go to the voters? We just went to the voters for one of our key properties, and that's a library. It is not ADA compliant. We have a number of buildings in Manitou Springs that we own that are in very difficult shape. The Public Service Department is probably the number one. And so if we don't do that, then we also have employees, quite frankly, that are pretty upset with this facility, upset both for their health and also for the working environment. So we have turnover up there, which is obviously very difficult for us to accomplish our maintenance needs if we have significant turnover. We did just change our public service director. And so it would be really a burden and very difficult for us to continue our maintenance efforts unless we were able to shift. Again, these aren't new dollars. We're not asking for anything special. We're just asking for the allocation of the dollars, or to allocate the dollars that are already allocated to us to use in a way that allow us to accomplish the maintenance needs that we need to take care of. So, we really do appreciate your consideration. I think it does fit. And we hope that you would agree.
I'm going to interject just for a second and ask Ms. Ivy, we discussed, can you please read the relevant portions of both the statute, which I agree with you, Mr. Duray, the statute does specifically allow for coverage, but more problematic is the ballot language, which is more restrictive than the statute.
And the ballot language is not in the packet, I don't believe.
That's why I'm asking her to
Okay.
read.
Right, so I won't go through the entire definition of regional transportation system, but it starts off with means any property improvement or system, and then there's a lot of words in between, including but not limited to, a lot more words in between, and administrative or maintenance facilities.
And that's the statute that authorizes the ballot language that has been approved by the voters, right?
Right, and then
Okay.
the ballot language, which goes back to the 2004 ballot when the maintenance and transit were voted in, reads, for the purposes of funding maintenance, repair, and operations for roadways and bridges.
So my question to you, Mr. Jones,
Yes, sir.
is using that secondary language, and Ms. Ivy can repeat it again, can you tell me, and tell the people gathered here from your perspective, why this facility is necessary to accomplish that ballot language?
To accomplish the maintenance on our bridges, roadways.
So for purposes of funding maintenance, repair, and operations for roadways and bridges.
Well, sure. I mean, just like any other place, you have to have a facility to operate out of. store your equipment, to store your asphalt, to train your folks, to make sure your paperwork's correct. I mean, you have to have a facility or headquarters in order to do that. I mean, if that wasn't the case, then we'd all operate out of tents, trying to get things done, and obviously we're not going to do that. You have to have a proper facility in order for your people to work out of. And just like anything, it's a domino effect. If you have a proper facility that you provided for your equipment, for your maintenance and highway folks, for your roads, then it's going to be a domino effect, and it's going to affect how you get that accomplished for your people. Manitou Springs, even though it's on the most western corridor out of Colorado Springs, it has a lot to offer. And in order for folks to get to the COG that's going to open up in another year or so, in order to get to the incline, you got to come through Manitou Springs. And then in the summertime, there's a lot of visitors that come there. Okay, in order to get there, you got to have good roadways to do that. So you got to have a good facility in order to support that. Otherwise, you're not going to get the quality that's expected from the voters on that.
And Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you. So I think you said this was already allocated dollars, or
Yes, sir.
were these already planned to be built, to be used on $350,000 of road improvements? So now, are you cutting $350,000 from road improvements to pay for this?
So that's a good
question. Because I think the public might not like that. That would be a concern in terms of going forward future.
So we do have carryover as well from last year, $400-something estimated. So we're actually looking at about $700,000 we have.
A PPRTA fund.
Correct.
Correct.
So we're requesting the $350 out of that, so we still should be okay with everything we're doing that we've programmed for our roadways and our projects.
Okay, so you're not.
Yeah,
Mr. Duray.
And I would suggest that at least in our community, we would recognize that if we don't provide a safe place for our employees to work, we're not going to get the work done. We are simply not going to get the road work done. And frankly, that's what's happening in our community now. We're not getting the work done. And in part, it's because we don't have the place for the employees to work. And those that do work there are quite unhappy.
And there's a high turnover.
And it's just not working for us. So we want to comply with the maintenance, but we've got to be able to have the funds to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
It looked like Mr. Williams has.
Yeah, I recognize that the RTA enabling statute allows it. It also allows administration, I think those are in the same phrase, if I remember right, administrative or facilities, but we capped administration at 1% in the RTA. And I will tell you, the physical facilities, as evidenced by the rejection of the city's request, which, although you say the numbers were larger, that's true, but proportionately, compared to the allocation, actually less. Because of the disparity in population, the numbers were significantly different. But the promise we made to the voters, and you can go back to Mayor Stewart, who was helping to lead the Pikes Peak RTA campaign, we always talked about roads. We never talked about the buildings necessary to support. I recognize they're necessary to support, but so's an accounting department, so's a billing department, so's a host of other things that are support issues for it. But I seriously believe there is an issue with changing existing RTA policy to allow physical buildings when we've said in the past no. And I think that jeopardizes the ability to renew the RTA. And again, I don't argue the need. This just isn't the right place for that need to be addressed.
Mr. Stevens, and then Mr. Duray.
I note number 3 of the memo that the City of Colorado Springs transit funds in the 2020 draft budget are proposed to match federal grant to build a building to house buses. What's that amount?
Can you repeat that?
I just noticed in the memo that the number 3, the City of Colorado Springs transit funds, in the 2020 draft budget are proposed to match a federal grant to build a building to house buses, which seems related.
Yeah, I believe I asked that question in our pre-meeting, and I thought it was 25 million, because I asked the same question.
Is that right?
We're checking, and Mr. Lewis might have that on top of his head.
Good question, thanks.
Yeah. Sorry to bring you up when you're not expecting it.
Sure.
And if you want to sit, this is going to be a discussion for a while.
Good afternoon, Craig Blewett, Transit Services Manager for the City of Colorado Springs. I think the question is about the, in our proposed budget for 2020, we are including some of the PPRTA money that's the 10% for dedicated for city-sponsored transit activities to use PPRTA funding to match federal grant. The amount of PPRTA money, I believe, is 20% of the project.
Do you remember the amount?
I'll look to my support group here. I'm going to guess it's about $2 to $3 million.
$2 to $3 million. For the whole
Yes.
project was 25.
Well, the whole project, I believe, is about $11 million.
Okay.
So it's
All right.
20% of that.
Okay, thank you.
We can get you the precise numbers if you need them.
Mr. Stevens, is that sufficient? All right, Mr. Duray. Ms. Avila.
I think when we look at this, we're looking like a building and then roads. And the way I see this project, the building is really coexistent with the roads to be able to structure that. I think we need to, since it follows the statute, we don't need to be so rigid, and we need to be more flexible, and this money's already been allocated. So, and they're not asking for the full $550,000. I think this is an important effort to support.
Any other questions, comments? I have some questions. Mr. Duray.
I would just say that if we had other sources, we would look at other sources.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, our budget this year that we haven't quite passed, but we're looking at less than about a 10% reserve, way lower than we'd like. We just don't have other sources of money. And we have these other needs that we can't address, unfortunately. So it really would be a benefit to us and a burden if we didn't have it.
Mr. Jones, I'm
Yes,
going to
sir.
ask you to elaborate a little bit. Actually, you can elaborate as much as you want. And discuss what this building is originally designed to do and what it's contemplated doing in terms of specifically maintenance, operation, and repairs. How does it support that in terms of, does it house these machines? Does it allow for repairs? You know, who resides there? What does it do in terms of supporting street, public works and things like that? If you can just give it
Sure.
a
Absolutely. So, thank you for that question. It's a good question. It supports our administrative as well as we have maintenance bay.
how many administrative people are you talking about?
When I say administrative, I'm counting myself, my deputy, and we have a new, and an admin person. And we also have a new city engineer coming on that's going to be working for me up there, too. So it's very few of those. There is a maintenance bay, very large maintenance bay over there that we use for all of our maintenance on our street
How many
equipment.
How many vehicles are
I want to say we have an excess of 42 vehicles total, and some pieces of equipment are considered vehicles that we have because they're street legal. We have a lot of, as any other maintenance would have, a lot of backhoes, a lot of, tool cats, and so on and so forth. It's the hub of the operation for all of that, and it directly supports the planning and the execution of our maintenance and our street work and our infrastructure, 100%. Because like I said before, and the gentleman said earlier, I was talking about the money, the comparison. That's a very true statement compared to the size of Colorado Springs. But the size of Colorado Springs is why it has so many maintenance facilities. But I draw back to the point of we have one, and that one is not sufficient for our operations. And I think that's key.
Yeah. How about materials that are used on the streets, gravel, tar? I'm sorry, also, in terms of materials, what's
Sure. So we have a support building that's beside it that is used to store some of our aggregate and our support material for the streets. Also, behind our facility, we have bays, outdoor bays that are used and made out of Jersey barriers, Texas barriers, concrete barriers that we store various things in. So it is used for some of our assets that we have, of course, yeah.
And I understand the human relations component of having of housing everybody in a trailer. How is it, if at all, impacting the ability to do the Public Works Department activities?
Okay. The public aspect part of it for our folks, the personal aspect, is that we have no bathroom in there whatsoever.
Right. I understand that.
We're limited on our computer accesses that we have in there. There's so many land drops you can have coming into the place. We have 27 to 28 people in a double-wide trailer that we've doubled up in offices, and it's limiting what we can do. People have to take turns or shifts trying to get their work accomplished on the computers to support that maintenance. What this effort would do for this new facility would provide maintenance bays and a work facility, workstations for everybody in there. And it would be more efficient, it would be smarter, and it would also provide the best type of infrastructure that we can provide for people in our community and our visitors when it comes to our roads, our bridges, and everything else that we have. I think it would be paramount. Yes, sir.
Mr. Williams.
So, while there may have only been one that came to formal vote, I would note the city has made other attempts in the past to get maintenance buildings approved that have been turned down and didn't actually result in a final vote. So
Okay.
it has been something that didn't just happen once. But let me just put things in perspective. You're talking about spending 115% of your entire maintenance allocation on a building, which means negative 15% going to roads. So the equivalent amount for the city at that percentage would be a $29.1 million maintenance building, or a series of maintenance buildings, if you will. So this is, not only is this something we've never approved before, it is vastly disproportional and means there's $0 of the allocated budget actually going to roads. And so it's not, hey, help us out with a little bit. It is, we're not going to build any roads at all. Because I'm looking at the budget that we just reviewed, and it's the maintenance allocation for Manitou Springs is $305,281.
Yes.
So
there's also a carryover, sir, of $400,000.
But you're talking about spending more than your entire yearly allocation on a building, and nothing then out of that yearly allocation on a road.
If you go solely off the yearly allocation, you are correct.
And so, again, the city has tried a number of times. It's always been told no. Do you think it would be helpful for you to have a chance, since you weren't aware of the maintenance of effort requirement, to review and see if it is possible and then come back next month to review?
I think, as the mayor said, I think it would be difficult to reallocate those funds. I think it would be very difficult because there's other entities involved with that I'm not so sure we could.
And the boss, Bev, is coming up to say something else.
In the maintenance of effort that was given to us by Manitou Springs, 350 of next year's, or 2019 budget, so the total was 465, 350,000 is wages and benefits, and then there's insurance.
Okay.
And other items. So most of it are things that can't be charged to the RTA.
Okay, thanks.
I have another, I'm sorry, are you done, Mr. Williams? I'm done for now. Anybody else have any questions? Because I do have one other follow-up. The carryover of $471,000.
Okay.
roughly.
Roughly, right.
If you know this, Mr. Jones, if not, I'll defer to the mayor since you've only been in this position for 4 months now. Is there the need proportionally to the need for this facility of 700 and roughly $800,000 for roads? Because you take the fact that there's a carryover from last year, presumably it means either we didn't have the facilities or the resources to get around to it, or we didn't need it. So the question is, why is there a carryover from last year?
I can tell you what I know about it.
All right.
And I've actually been in this position about 3 weeks.
Okay.
So I was the deputy before. So to answer that, from what I understand, is that the reason the carryover is that they did not get around to getting it done.
Okay.
And that's why the carryover is there.
Is there the expectation that that carryover will be expended in this year?
As long as I'm here, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because one thing that is needed is proper roads.
Okay.
And bridges and transportation conduits.
Any other questions, concerns? I mean, I think we can have a discussion about this, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, without getting into too much detail, unfortunately, we had people that weren't showing up for work because they were sick, and we had a lot of that going on at the beginning of the year, and you can't get the roads done. You can't get the work done if your people don't show up. If they're afraid to work in this building and they're not willing to show up, it's really difficult to do what we need to do. So, you get down to the human level, and human level, people need a place to work, and then they'll accomplish their work. So, anyway, I think we probably covered it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Gonzalez?
No,
Okay.
I'm just thinking.
Okay, Ms. Ivy, are you just being, that's all right, I couldn't tell if you needed, all right, I think we're done with you, Mr. Jones.
Okay.
Mr. Sonnenberg wanted to make a presentation at this point.
Sure.
You can sit here because you may be needed to come back
might
up.
be.
My expectation.
It's a good conversation.
Rick Sonnenberg, I just wanted to take 30 seconds and cover the pros and cons that were discussed at the CAC that are in my memo. Number one is that the state statute, we've already covered that, state statute appears to allow it. Flip side of that is the state statute is very broad and includes gondolas, so it's just because it's allowed in the state law doesn't mean we have to pay for gondolas. And again, I'm just being a reporter, I'm not taking sides. Number two, the ballot language, as the Attorney Ivy stated, contains the word operations, which could be interpreted to include a building. Number three, we talked about the draft 2020 budget contains some funding in transit for a bus barn. Number four, I included as an attachment to my memo, April 29 of 2005, the very fourth month of the existence of the PPRTA, there was a request by the city. Mr. Jones covered it. It was a $4 million request of the city of Colorado Springs to build a building, and that was turned down unanimously by the PPRTA board at that time. That's a single historical fact that I was able to find. There may be others that I wasn't able to find in my research. Number five, discussed at the CAC meeting, is the slippery slope phrase. If this is approved, then other member governments, et cetera, and that if we start building lots of buildings, that might harm the PPRTA 3 ballot renewal. Number six, the argument that some people have already made today and was made at the CAC is that remodeling of the building should be an expense borne by the city of Manitou Springs. And number seven, the flip side of the argument is that the Mayor Jure has made, a health and safety issue, so that's an argument in favor. So those were the 7 pros and cons that I captured from the discussion at the CAC.
Thank you, sir. So I would just note that the CAC apparently had much the same discussion for a little bit longer than we did about much the same things that we're dealing with right now. So I thank you guys for doing that. And there was a split, which I think we're going to have a split here. I'll open it up, Miss Avila.
Avila. I'll break up the tension anyway. Thank you, Chair Geislinger. Behind your back, I say gunslinger. I'm going to talk an analogy. Okay, so let's say we have a business, and in that business we have money allocated for computers. And it goes to computers. This is instead of roads, right? And it goes to computers. However, we don't have a workforce at all to fill those positions and even use the computers, because we need that workforce in that area for to operate out of this place, out of this building, to receive to work on the computers. So it's like saying, okay, well, you're supposed to spend all this money on these computers, and that's what the statute says. Well, not the statute, the ballot. But we don't have even the workforce or the building or the operational staff to make it happen. And so it just makes sense to me to provide the building. It's an integral part of having those roads and bridges built and maintained and repaired. I don't see how you do it. It's like it's a foundational issue. And this is, maybe in money and stuff it compares, but on a human level it does not. This is the only building. And it's ready to go. And I think it's money, I'm going to repeat it, already allocated. It is so being rigid and saying, nope, it's this, too bad, too sad. This is what you got to do. I don't think that is the spirit of this ballot issue either. So I am really in favor of supporting this allocation. And I think, are we setting precedents? Maybe, and maybe not. And we can look at each matter as it comes before us. But I guess I just don't get, okay, it's only this way, so linear that, and yeah, I think the voters also voted to trust us on how we were going to delve out this money. And this isn't being frivolous, this isn't being, it's being very thoughtful on what the needs are. Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one is tough for me because, I've heard it from in the pre-meeting. We had the exact same discussions. But the part based on these current discussions, I'm actually going to use Yolanda's discussion here and then kind of relate back to the 100% over here is that's a good example. So the example of dollars allocated for computers. Okay, well, you need to buy the desk. You need to buy the power surges. You need to make sure the outlets are in compliance. You need to make sure the monitors are there. But at the end of the day, $0 are spent on the computers in this example because it looks like it's the entire allocation, dollars-wise. And that's where, if it was a portion of that allocation, I would be a little more open, and I'm still kind of open to it. But I think you had a very good point there. But in this example, none of the dollars are being spent on the computers. They're all being spent on the desk and the outlets to support computers, but there's no dollars because the entirety of that, it sounds like, of that year's allocation is going to the building, not to the roads. I understand there's leftover dollars, but that's my concern is such a great percentage of what that allocation is supposed to be.
Mr. Duray first and then...
Yeah, since we were not able to use that money and given the size of our street department and so forth, we're not going to be able to double up. We can't this year or next year, do $800,000 worth of work. We just can't do it. How many people do we have in our street department?
3.
3 people. And so we're not going to catch up on the work. It's just not practical. So now the question is, can we move forward and actually do future work? So the question of that there's zero money going into it, we can't do anything about last year. That's already done. The question is, can we now make sure that we commit, and Mr. Jones has already committed, that we'll get our maintenance of effort and our future dollars done this year. And so that's really the key. Not that $0 are going in. It's future dollars will go in if we have the proper facilities to take care of it. So I think that there is a difference there.
Mr. Williams and then Mr. Waller.
It's pretty clear what the folks at the time, because you look at the fact it was a unanimous rejection of the city's proportionally much smaller request. Not a divided vote of the board, but a unanimous vote of the Pikes Peak RTA board. City, county, Manitou, Green Mountain Falls all said that's not appropriate. And yes, an allocation was made. But the issue is, if you want to change the allocation, does this board get to change what the voters intended? And so if the voters, if you had a ballot issue and said, I want to buy computers, and then the board said, with my colleague's analogy here, yeah, but we need people to run and operate the computers, well, then you got to go back to the voters to get it changed. And to say that we're going to ignore the voters, and then, even if you believe there's discretion to ignore the voters, the ballot language stuck in a citizens advisory committee who's told us, no, this is not appropriate. And that's what the voters put in as the check. And so not just the history of this board, but the Citizens Advisory Committee has specifically said, no, that's not appropriate. The fact that you would like to spend money on something else, but you're constrained by the ballot language, is what distinguishes things like the Pikes Peak RTA and the 2C, just renewed by the city, from CC that the voters rejected, which didn't have the guardrails in it. And the fact is, this community overwhelmingly rejected the give us the money and trust us to spend it appropriately approach. The reason Pikes Peak RTA was passed, the reason it was renewed with 79.5% of the vote, is because we actually followed the promises. And if we were to depart from the long-standing practice with respect to maintenance dollars, we put renewal of the RTA in jeopardy. And I'm not willing to do that. To the extent there is a desire to overturn what the voters said and overturn what the Citizens Advisory Committee said, there's a process for that in a different ballot language. With respect to can 3 people get this much done, there are certainly contractors who would be chomping at the bit for the opportunity to pave roads in Manitou Springs. And so it does not need to be done internally. Contracting is a way of approaching things. But I am very concerned that if we reject 14 years of precedence and reject what we've told the voters and reject the history of this body and reject the advice of the Citizens Advisory Committee, we put the RTA in jeopardy, and I don't think that's appropriate.
Mr. Waller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I'm going to split hairs with you just a little bit, Council Member Williams. I think we're talking about a difference between voter intent and voter contemplation. I don't know that the voters contemplated that this would happen, but I don't think that, you know, when the voters voted on this, there was some sort of intent to say, well, geez, I think it's going to be okay if the City of Colorado Springs allocation is a certain amount of dollars, that they can put 20% of that towards building buildings, whereas if Manitou Springs is going to be building a building and they only have 1% of the overall RTA funds, are they going to be able to build a building that contemplates spending more than their overall allocation? I think throw intent out the window on that. what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Either the voters intended to use this money to build buildings or they didn't. That's it. I think that's the discussion that we should be having here. And I don't know that the voters intended that or not. Did they contemplate that that would happen? What I'm hearing from the attorney is that it falls within the statutory guidelines to be able to build a building with RTA dollars. Now, I would argue that as the voters contemplate spending RTA dollars and thinking about RTA dollars, I would argue to you that voters in my district, in eastern Colorado Springs and eastern El Paso County, would, if they're going to spend dollars on roads, they don't contemplate what percentage of the dollars go to Manitou Springs, what percentage of the dollars go to Colorado Springs, what percentage of the dollars end up in unincorporated El Paso County. They consider how the dollars are spent overall. And so I would argue to you that my voters, if they were to look at this and say, would you rather, A, spend $350,000 on a building in Manitou Springs, or B, spend $3 million on a building in Colorado Springs, every single time they'd say, spend the $350,000 on the building in Manitou Springs. I think that's the way they see that. They see this as an overall overarching approach to transportation spending, not in Colorado Springs, not in El Paso County, not in Manitou Springs, but in our region. And so I think I could be, well, I'm not sure I could be convinced either way at this point. I think I support the expenditure of the dollars, and I only support it for this reason and this reason alone. Statutorily, it's allowed. I certainly think if this is not supported, then any future spending on buildings, period, is not appropriate. If we're going to make a policy decision and say these dollars are for roads, then they're for roads. We're not splitting hairs over what percentage of the dollars should be spent one way or the other. So I'm prepared to support this. I don't like it. I don't think that's what the voters contemplated, but it's what the statute allows. And I think the voters are going to be just fine if we spend $350,000 of RTA money on a building in Manitou Springs.
And I'm going to agree with you almost 70%. But I think
you couldn't do more. You would not be you if it was more than that. That's for sure.
But what I have been persuaded by is that WEMA is not Colorado Springs. Manitou Springs is not Colorado Springs. Manitou Springs, as a governing, one of the participating governments, has come forward by their mayor and by their Public Works Department saying for Manitou Springs, this is necessary for the maintenance, operation, and repairs of streets and bridges in Manitou Springs. So we're not creating a precedent. What we are saying is that the smaller jurisdictions are not the same as the bigger jurisdictions. That questions about the $3 million, and that's where I agree with you, that there's a difference between Colorado Springs, arguably saying we want $4 million for this, and Manitou Springs saying this is necessary for the operation of our Public Works Department. And that's why I don't think it's a slippery slope. Because what we are recognizing is that we are recognizing that we are different jurisdictions, we are different sizes, there are different issues that need to be addressed. And I don't think, and I may be wrong, and voters may prove me wrong, but I don't think the voters said that representatives of El Paso County and the city of Colorado Springs are going to be able to tell Manitou Springs you cannot use your percentage of tax dollars. And Mr. Stevens, we're not going to tell Greenwood Springs or Greenwood. I'm sorry, Green Mountain Falls that you can't do what you're going to do.
He lives in Avila, Colorado.
Yes. So, Mr. Stevens, go ahead. Sorry.
I think actually that's one of the beauties of the RTA is simply that we've created a funding mechanism to pull together very disparate government entities, and the needs are different. This is a funding mechanism. This is not a direct policy mechanism, and we've allowed each entity to prioritize and put forth what their priorities are. I, too, am supportive. However, I'm not very excited about the dollar amounts either, but and I wish it could be done as Councilmember Williams suggested, of moving things around a little bit. But I think that it really is important for us as member entities of the RTA to be able to set our priorities and come before this board and say, this is what is in the best interest of accomplishing the original 2004 ballot language of providing, transportation, maintenance, roadway operations and such. And, to those ends, it's hard for me to parse down into the individual expenditures for any entity to figure out what that requires. I remember struggling years and years ago over Colorado Springs asking for us to pay for safety glasses, vests, and boots. That was a struggle for me. And, that's different. El Paso County, by contrast, puts it has traditionally put it directly into materials or contracts for roadways. So there's a wide variety of things. There's a lot of precedent for how we decide what comes forth. But ultimately, in my view, the RTA is a funding mechanism that helps us have one further look at these issues, and we can struggle with what that means and how that works, but really we have to rely on those member entities' recommendation and what they want to do and make sure that it is legal and appropriate. And if the members of the community that made that decision, who are elected officials, are facing re-election and those citizens are unhappy, that ballot is the opportunity for them to change those elected officials.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah, I've got to respond to some of the overstatements that were just made. First, this board has consistently had the power to reject a proposal from a member entity. And to the extent several of the remarks indicated this board does not have that power, that misstates the law, it misstates the history. This board has rejected, for example, the city's request for a maintenance facility. So to say that whatever the member entity goes, this board must rubber stamp is not accurate. So when you say this board isn't allowed to do that, yes, this board is allowed and is charged by both the enabling statute and by the ballot language that contemplated there would be a check. And so I think people may have overstated what they meant, but I needed to clarify that because otherwise, this board could meet for 30 seconds, and that's not what this board does. This board does have the right to review. It is charged with that right to review, and it is an important step. The fact that some folks want to reverse the precedents we have said and said it applies differently for smaller communities, so be it, but that does not mean that this board has lost its power to review.
I'm not sure anybody said that. I didn't mean to imply it to the extent that you heard that. I think that there's still a necessary oversight, and I see Mr. Stevens nodding in agreement that there is a necessary oversight that the Citizens Advisory Committee and we both serve. I think now I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Giray looks like he wants to make the motion.
Sure. I'd move approval of item 8C.
A second.
I think we should do a voice vote on this particular. So, Mr. Stevens.
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Waller.
Aye.
Miss Avila. However it works. I preach in Spanish, and I can't pronounce it. Go ahead.
Guys are not hearing anything. Aye.
Mr. Williams.
No.
Mr. Gonzalez.
If I can make a comment.
Sure.
Okay, all right. So I'm still struggling on this one, but I did want to highlight two things. My concern here is if they can't get any streets done if they don't do this, and as their experts have stated, they believe that to be true. I'm also, as I have done once before with a different entity on one of these where I was very not sure how I was going to vote, I gave them the benefit of doubt on the first time, and it was tougher the second time. And I promised to be the exact same way on these things. They come questionable from the same entity. So I'm going to be an aye.
You're going to be a what?
Aye.
Aye. And I say aye, so it carries on a 2, 3, 4, 6-1 vote. Thank you.
Outstanding.
For 2.
Thank you. I'll take 100%.
Item 9A, City of Colorado Springs Transit Services Monthly Report.
Good afternoon again. Craig Blewett, Transit Services Manager with the City of Colorado Springs. Our report is in your packet. Just want to highlight a few things. Our fixed route system, in September of this year compared to September of last year, we saw an increase of almost 11% in ridership, which is outstanding. That is one more weekday and one less Saturday than the previous year, but still, that's a good gain. On our ADA paratransit service, we saw a decrease of nearly 12%. So year to date, our fixed route system is up about 6% this year, and our ADA paratransit is down about 8% for the year. Our van pool program, we just had a slight decrease of 4%. That's within normal variation from year to year. And we also have a report in there on two key projects, two key planning projects. One is our 2045 transit plans. So there's a traditional transit plan as well as our specialized transit plan. And we're also doing a North Nevada transit corridor analysis. I think we've talked about that before as well, but there's information in the report on the status of those two. Key is there should be draft reports on both the transit plan and the specialized plan out yet this week. So we look forward to those. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Miss Avila. Yolanda. Now you got me just...
Thank you, Chair Geisler. I just wanted to comment that I am the transit rep for PPACG. And so I get together with Craig and Brian Batuli, as well as Andy Gunning and John Leoslados, and we talk about what's going on with transit and what our goals are and what's going on. And so I think that's really great. Because for PPACG, that's 10% of the budget, and we want to make it a really full 10% of the budget and have people really look at transportation. One of the things that Andy Pico was excited about was marketing. What is it called? The aardvark?
Yeah, for UCCS.
Yeah.
Their mascot. Yes.
Yeah, that PPCC.
Yeah.
And so the aardvark rides transit. So we're looking at expanding it, getting other choice riders people to use transit more often. And I use Metro Mobility, but I have to say that I'm one of the persons that's using it less because since I'm downtown, I'm taking the fixed route a lot more than I used to. So thank you, Greg, for the update.
Any other questions? And Mr. Blewett, this is just a repetitive question that I'd always like to, whenever you come in and talk about this, how is the percentage changes in our ridership corresponding to national trends, other regional trends?
Sure. Nationally, we're seeing a lot of in other communities where transit ridership is down. Again, the economy has been great, and there is a sort of reciprocal sort of relationship there, inverse relationship. So nationally, it's down a bit, and we're fortunate to see an increase in ridership.
I would love to figure out, and just to kind of look at the metrics is why, and continue to jump on that. So well done.
Good deal. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, sir. 9B, City of Colorado Springs Monthly Change Order and Property Acquisition Report. Mr. Chavez didn't think he'd be here 10 after 3, and you're still here.
It's 10 after 3.
It's 10 after 3.
Good afternoon, Mike Chavez, City Engineering. This is just an informational item. Are there any questions on that?
Any questions on the monthly change order and property acquisition report? Seeing none, you can go now. Thank you. Item 10A, legal services contract extension with Eisenagel, Seaver, and Pogue. And I can't say Avila.
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 You got it.
High school Spanish.
But you don't preach in Spanish?
No.
And they understand it.
I don't preach, period. The Eisenagel, Seaver, Pogue, and predecessor law firm have been providing legal services to the Pikes RTA since the inception in January 1st of 2005, and even a few months before. The contract that was approved last year provides for several one-year extensions, and Jennifer Ivey, our PPRTA attorney from the firm, has submitted a letter requesting a one-year extension of her firm's services for the calendar year 2020, and PPRTA staff recommends approval. The fees are attached, as well as the prior year, to show the increases.
Any questions? I'm going to entertain a motion from Mr. Gonzalez.
I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams has a question.
What's the change, any in billing rates?
Our 2019 billing rate for PPRTA, my billing rate was $250. It's $260 this year, which is a discount for my normal rate of $310 next year. I think that's the right number.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, comments? We do have a motion. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous this year, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Item 10B.
And this is a contract extension, a one-year contract extension with state legislative lobbyist Dan Jablan of Cherry Point Strategies Group. The board last year extended Mr. Jablan's contract for 2019, and the staff is satisfied with his services in lobbying state legislature on our behalf. So the staff is recommending a one-year extension for Mr. Jablan for 2020 at the current rate of $50,000 for the entire year, billed prorated monthly for aggregate total for the year of $15,000.
Just to clarify, Mr. Williams.
So not having been here during the legislative session, I hear the staff recommendation. I just wanted to check with the board and get your input as to whether we got effective services here.
Well, the clarification from Mr. Sonnenberg was to, as I read originally, it was for $180,000 a year at $15,000 a month, and I objected to that.
That's a really...
So I think, yes, I'm very comfortable and would recommend approval at the $15,000 a year, prorated monthly.
Move approval.
A second? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item 10C, reappointment process for Citizen Advisory Committee members.
At the last board meeting, the board directed the staff advertise for the vacant PPRTA at-large, regular and at-large alternate positions that were going to be coming available first of the year. We had 4 positions that had December 31 of 2019 term ending. One can be appointed for a second term, that's Jean Bray. The others are not eligible for reappointment in their position, but past practice is that board has been agreeable. If they wanted to keep the CAC member, they could move them from at-large alternate to regular or regular to at-large alternate. So bottom line is we have 4 openings as of the first of the year, and we have 4 candidates from the advertisement on Sunday, October 20. We had 1 new candidate, Mr. James Moore. His application and resume is in the packet. So we have 3 incumbents that would like to be reappointed, and we have 1 new applicant for an open position, Mr. Moore. So your 2 options are to, number 1, to ask the board's subcommittee of the board chair, vice chair, and the CAC chair per policy number 23, and that's attached in your packet, to ask that the subcommittee to review and make a recommendation next month, or if the subcommittee's ready, the subcommittee could make a recommendation to the board today for the appointments effective 1/1/2020.
And I would just state that the subcommittee informally met at noon and made the recommendation today. Mr. Williams.
I think we know the existing members have all served well, and I think I think Colonel Moore is the additional one.
Yes.
And so I believe, given that there are 4 applications and 4 vacancies, and everyone in the world had the chance to apply, that appointing these is appropriate. And so I move to appoint the applicants to the positions for which they applied.
Okay, any questions, comments, concerns? We do have a motion and a second, so all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? There being none, that motion carries. 10E, GAP project update.
Oh, 10D, if I might.
Oh, 10D. Oh, that's right. We did.
Just an information item, just to remind the board that your appointments to this board are from your governing bodies for the calendar year. So if you want to be reappointed for 2020, calendar year 2020, please seek that reappointment from your respective governing bodies and let us know what the results are.
Okay.
The second reminder is that pursuant to the bylaws, at your January meeting of each year, you need to select your board officers. That's the chair, vice chair, and the board secretary. The bylaws specify that the City of Colorado Springs and El Paso County get the chair and vice chair, and that they have to flip each year. So since City of Colorado Springs has the chair this year, the chair, El Paso County would get the chair position, and City of Colorado Springs would get the vice chair position in 2020. So please be thinking about that for your January meeting.
Any questions or comments? 10E then, which is?
I've put in bold one new item, which I think was mentioned orally at last month's meeting, and that is that number 4, that on the GAP project, that CDOT did find the money to replace the County Line Road Bridge. It's now included in the project. Design will start in early 2020 with construction planned for 2021.
Mr. Williams.
Let me just ask, is Jennifer still here? Yeah. So with CDOT's decision to do that, does that then enable you guys to go forward on Beacon Light? And just for those who may not know geographically, County Line Road's at I-25, Beacon Light is just to the west of that intersection.
Parallel to I-25.
Yeah. Jennifer Irvin, County Engineer. As we discussed last month, I believe that we awarded a contract to Michael Baker on that project in, I want to say, November. My staff is having had a kickoff of that design, and it's in the contract that talks about the coordination between CDOT and El Paso County. The grade that's coming off that interchange affects the intersection of Beacon Light and County Line Road, and we did want to be able to coordinate that. The design has already been done by county staff to about a 20 to 30% on Beacon Light Road, so this is the exact time that we should be coordinating with CDOT, and I'm very excited because I think that we'll end up, both of us, with a better project because we're able to collaborate on that.
Okay. Thanks. Do we know what width they're building County Line Road at? Is it a 2-lane or 4-lane or 3?
I'm happy to say that it is, I had a lot of coordination meetings with CDOT and Douglas County and as a representative of El Paso County on that. It's not a 4-lane through road because our traffic projections both from Douglas County, El Paso County, and CDOT doesn't show the need for that to be a 4-lane roadway within the long term. But what we were able to do was to make sure that we accommodated for that future growth. If you look at, instead of having a 1-lane left turn lane, we put in a double left turn lane, essentially side by side. So, but then I also asked them to include some shoulders in there. And what that will allow us to do is that if in the future, we do need to have more lanes in there. We'll able to, at least for a short term, be able to use that shoulder, because those shoulders are going to be 10 feet, to be able to accommodate that. So I think, although it doesn't show the 4 lanes, our long-term plans really don't show that, but if that does happen, then I think we can accommodate. It will be tight, but then that will allow us to plan for a future width.
Excellent.
So.
Congrats.
Terrific. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Then I think we are to item 11, which is member announcements. Does anybody have anything else to say or talk about? Mr. Chavez, sort of a member. Sort of a member.
Well, I kind of speak loud. I got 7 kids, so. But I did mention last week at the CAC recording.
It's right at center. Icon right at center.
There you go.
I just want to report to the CAC, I mentioned that the Academy Bridge over Cottonwood Creek project that we finished this summer got an award from the American Council of Engineering Companies in the excellence category. So the consultant informed us last week of that. And then it's also eligible for the national award. So they're going to go. The consultant's going to go to D.C. and represent us. So
Wow,
bring that.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yay. And sort of member Irvin.
Yeah. Jennifer Irvin again. I was reminded, thank you, by Jim Godfrey. I think you've already received an invitation, but our ribbon cutting for the West Colorado Avenue project is this Friday at 10 a.m. I do see that the weather is showing at 10 a.m. to be in the mid-50s, so hopefully the weather will hold. And I just want to thank you all for your support as we have wrapped up or are substantially complete on nearing substantial completion, but we still do have some additional closeout work to do. But I'm very excited for that project to reach the point where it is.
Really? You're glad to be done with it?
We're never done with it.
Anybody have any other comments or questions? All right. That being said, we are adjourned. Oh, that's right. I do have to do signs. I forgot. 4 o'clock. We're going to.